So recently, I participated in another game jam, GMTK 2024 Game Jam. I was lucky enough to make this little game with some amazing people. I have another video talking about how incredible game jams are, but I want to share a little bit about the process, how a little game like this got made. First, let's talk about the game jam in general. There are three main things you should know about it. Number one, it's hosted by an incredible YouTube channel called Game Maker's Toolkit, who has amazing videos on game development in general. You should honestly check it out if you haven't. Number two, the game jam was 4 days long. It's the longest game jam I've ever done. And number three, I was working on a team of 5. This was our first time working together, and we were all working remotely. So, let's dive into the 4-day saga of the GMTK 2024 Game Jam. Friday came along, and my team and I eagerly waited for the theme to be announced from the GMTK channel, where we learned that the theme would be Built to Scale. After hearing the theme, we all took some time to think separately of ideas. There's this weird balance of how long you should think of an idea before you start working on it. You have all this pressure because you have such a limited time to work on it, but it's so important to find an idea you're excited about and feels like it's doable in the timeline. We all came back with a lot of really cool ideas, but the one that resonated with all of us was this idea of a spider building platforms from its webs, and then scaling up that building. Side note, it's actually really neat to see that some of our other ideas were actually brought to life by other teams, like this Gentle Giant one. Some team literally made this happen, and it's incredible to play. With the idea down, we broke up elements of the game to be worked on, and started with our respective tasks. My main task was to work on the player's movement as a spider. This was actually really great for me, since I've been working on a game called Lumina Rush, which is another 2D platformer. So I was pretty familiar with 2D platforming movement. So I cranked away and made some basic platforming movement, and then got to work on what spiders do best.
Up, and away, web! Shazam!
This also wasn't too bad, since I already created a swinging mechanic in Lumina Rush. But it was a bit different since it wasn't a static point in the level, and would be created dynamically depending on where you shot. With a bit more time and energy, I was able to make it work in a way that I was happy with. Then I played a bit more with the ability to gain momentum by swinging back and forth, until it was time to get some well-deserved sleep. That night, all I could think of was playing as a spider, and the one thing I couldn't stop thinking of was spiders climb on walls. So at 3 a.m., I decided, let's make this spider climb on some walls. I initially thought that I would have to rebuild the movement controller from scratch, but luckily it wasn't too bad, and I managed to get it done. So after that, I took a nap. After waking up, I implemented a level transition inspired by Jump King. And then it was finally time to implement the second core element of our game, building. This is the beauty of working with other people. Because while I was working on player movement, other work was being done to make building happen. But I don't want to give you the illusion that it's as easy as grabbing other people's work and throwing it in the game. It takes a bit of time and energy, especially when you aren't used to working with each other. That's why it's so important to start putting pieces together early rather than later, or else you'll end up scrambling way more at the end. But we got the pieces working together, and we had platforming and building. There was this cool moment when the two pieces came together and it felt like, ladies and gentlemen, we have a game. But then, the most magical thing happened. Our music man, Tom Sanborn, gave me some music to put in the game. Not only that, but he had this idea of having the music scale up as the player would progress through the level. Essentially, have multiple versions of the same song, but the song at the lowest would sound very basic, while the song at the top would sound like an orchestra. The music was so good that I was inspired to make this idea come to life. Luckily, all it took was 4 tracks all playing at the same time, but the volume of each would adjust dependent on the elevation of the player. Then he gave me a track for the building music, and went for the contrast of more intense music while you were platforming, while the building music was calm and peaceful. Putting it all together, it truly felt like we had something pretty amazing. This would typically be the day the jam would finish, but luckily we had more time, which was great because we weren't ready, but also had conquered a lot of the core mechanics. The next thing to work on was to create bugs for our spider to eat, so that he can have silk to build platforms with. We went through a bunch of different ideas when thinking about the web resource in the game, from you spending it to web sling to having refill stations at each build platform. But we ended up going with this game flow of eat, build, platform, repeat. Eating a bug would give you the web resource. Building would spend the resource and give you access to other building platforms or bugs. And platforming would actually move your character to the desired location. Was it a perfect game loop? No. But it was solid enough for us to take it and run with it. And that's what you have to do in game jams. Then it was time for one of my most favorite things in game jams. It was time to add some art to the game. Alec, our incredible artist, gave us this spider and animations to go with it. And he's the cutest goddamn spider you've ever seen! Getting art from an artist into your game will always feel like magic to me, because it truly feels like it takes your game to the next level. Like, I can't make art, and I can't make music this good, but I get to make a game that has this quality in it thanks to these amazing people. Sunday flew by, but we got the animations in and our spider felt alive. On Monday, we added some bug movement in, and added a stun effect so when the player touched a bug instead of webbing it, you would get stunned and fall down. Then, Tom gave me some sound effects for the game, and sound effects are one of those things that you don't notice that your game needs until you add it in, and then it changes everything. It gives such a visceral effect to all the actions done in the game and truly elevates it in a new way. After that, it was adding in more art for the bugs, animations for them being webbed, and finally a win screen for reaching the top. This is when we reached a moment that I've discovered is very important to me. As a developer, you get so lost in the game you're creating that you forget how it looks with fresh eyes. The mechanics you've developed become second nature to you, but some things might not be that intuitive for people. That's why I really believe a good tutorial can make or break a game, especially in a game jam. You get the attention of someone for 2 minutes tops. And if someone gets frustrated or confused with your game, they will just move on to the next one. But it's really hard to make a tutorial in a game jam because it takes a solid amount of time. And it's usually easier to just throw the controls in the description and let people figure it out. In my opinion, it can be one of the most important parts to a game. So I went about making a tutorial for our game and realized there were a lot of elements to teach the player. But luckily, I was able to simplify it so it wasn't an entire Word document that the player had to read to play the game. Tuesday started off by getting the backgrounds in and other platform art in. And with that, the game had all the art that was needed. So we were done. Well, sort of. If you're gonna do a game jam, make sure to leave yourself time to spare, because things will break. Two things broke for me when I built to WebGL, essentially allowing people to play in the browser. One, the material used for building visuals turned pink. We used some 3D objects for the building visual, and something happened causing the material to not be rendered properly. Luckily, the fix was just move it from a 3D object to a sprite, and we were good. The second thing that happened was the audio broke. You know how 4 different songs were playing at the same time? Well, in WebGL, it took a hot minute to load the song when it started playing, which would cause the songs to not be synced. That was really bad. I was able to fix it, thankfully, by converting the songs from MP3 files to .wav files, which I believe was the solution, but I got it done. Then, with 3 hours left, and after playtesting it and making sure nothing else was broken, I submitted it. I could have done more, but I was running on not a lot of sleep, and any major changes I would do would probably do more harm than good at that point. So let me present to you Up the Waterspout. Is it perfect? Nah. But I'm really proud of what my team made. It made the top 500 overall, which is pretty sweet when there was over 7,000 submissions. I hope this video helps anyone that's curious about doing a game jam and gives you a little bit more insight into the process of what goes through it. Oh, and by the way, wishlist Lumina Rush on Steam. I'm gonna be at DreamHack Atlanta with the game, so come down and say hi. You're all awesome, and I'll see you next time.